أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So after Kitab al-Mawarith, or the Book of Inheritance, we're going to move on to a small chapter that is after inheritance. A small chapter that is after inheritance. We're not going to spend too long on it because it's the chapter of rulings pertaining to slaves and how a person can free a slave and so on, so forth. So we're going to zoom past it, inshallah. The next chapter, as you realize after that, would be Bab al-Nikah or Kitab al-Nikah. Like, we're going to skip Kitab al-Nikah because we've already studied Kitab al-Nikah from Manhaj al-Salikin itself in one of the previous other centers. So go back to the recording, inshallah, online, because the lessons are uploaded, and then we're going to go into Talaq today, inshallah. باب العتق. يقول الشيخ سعد رحمه الله تعالى رحمة واسعة: باب العتق وهو تحرير الرقبة وتخليصها من الرق، وهو أفضل العبادات لحديث أيما امرئ أعتق امرأ مسلما استنقذ الله بكل عضو منه عضوا منه من النار. طيب, this chapter deals with al-Itq. Al-Itq, slavery, or freeing a person from slavery. The Shaykh says رحمه الله: وهو يعني عتق, it means تحرير الرقبة وتخليصها من الرق, to free a person from the shackles of slavery. وهو أفضل العبادات, and it is from the best of ibadat. It is the best of ibadat. أي من أفضل العبادات, from the best of ibadat. طيب, لحديث, because of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever frees a Muslim from the shackles of slavery, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, for every limb that he saves from that person, Allah will save from him a limb from the fire. وسئل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was asked, what أي رقاب أفضل, what type of slave is the best to free? فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: أعلاها ثمنا, the highest of it, ثمنا, وأنفسها عند أهلها, the most expensive and the most valuable slave to its people, meaning the people that own it, to free that slave. If the slave is valuable to them and he means a lot to them, or she means a lot to them, then to free that slave is from the best type of worship. نعم, متفق عليه. ويحصل العتق. Now the Shaykh is going to go into how does itq happen. How does a slave become free? The first thing is ويحصل العتق بالقول, verbally. وهو لفظ العتق وما في معناه. So the first way a person can be freed is if they say, if their master says, I free such and such, or you are free to go wherever you want. Yani that's the meaning of وَمَا فِي مَعْنَاهُ, and whatever has the same meaning. So the first is to verbally say, I free you. وَمَا فِي مَعْنَاهُ. وَبِالْمُلْكِ, also by ownership. What does this mean? فَمَنْ مَلَكَ ذَا رَحِمٍ مُحَرَّمٍ مِنَ النَّسَبِ أَتَقَ عَلَيْهِ. By ownership, this means if a person buys a family member of his who is rahim muharram, a father or a mother or someone who's close to them family wise, and we shall see the criterion for that, if they buy someone like that from the market, that person automatically becomes free. Suratul Mas'ala, for example, a person goes to the marketplace and he sees his father being sold. He buys his father. By him buying his father, the father automatically becomes free. The same for the mother. The same for your brother or your sister. And the same for your daughter or your son. Or your auntie, from both sides. Or uncles. That is the meaning of ذا رحم محرم. And there's a tabid, or what can kind of summarize that, which is كل شخصين, every two people لو كان أحدهما ذكرا والآخر أنثى, every two people who, if one of them was male and if one of them was a female, لم يجوز بينهما أو لم يجوز لهما أن يتناكحا, it would not be permissible for them to get married. So every ownership happens how? Or how does a slave become free by way of ownership? If they free a family member. Who is the family member that is being referred to? Is it a distant cousin or not? No. Mahram. It is every two people whom, if one of them was male and the other one was a female, it would be haram for them to get married. Mathalan, you and your father, or you and your brother, or you and your sister. If one of you is male and the other is female, it's haram for you guys to get married. Sah? Therefore, that's the sort of person that is being referred to. So the second is ownership. The third will be تمثيلي بعبده بقطع عضو من أعضائه أو تحريقه. And the next way is mutilation. If a person harms, cuts off a limb, or slaps his servant or harms his servant, then the servant becomes free. And in more than one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was told about a person who harmed his slave, cut off his nose or arm or whatever it may be. And then the Messenger ﷺ said, "Idhab anta hurrun," go, for you are free. He said that to the slave. So the third way is what? Mutilation. نعم. وبالسرايا لحديث من أعتق شركا له في عهده. طيب. The third way, or the fourth way, is something which is called saraya, or siraya, which is if a person belongs to, let's say, 3 individuals. A person is a slave of 3 individuals. You may ask, how is it possible that a person can be the property of 3 individuals? It can be. Mathalan, let's say a man owns a slave and 3 sons. The father dies. The inheritance goes to who? The 3 sons. Sah? And the slave, is he not wealth? So he'll come into inheritance. Sah? That is the Surah al-Mas'ala. So if a person is owned by more than one person, 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be, owned by more than one person, then if one of them frees him, then the rest of that servant becomes free. Lakin the hadith that we're going to study explains this. لحديث من أعتق شركا له في عبد فكان له مال يبلغ ثمن العبد قوم العبد عليه قيمة عدل. So what the first thing is, مثلا, let's say a person owns, or a slave is owned by 2 individuals. A person is owned by 2 individuals. One of them frees him. The other half obviously needs to be freed. So what happens is the one that freed him must also pay the extra share of the other individual in order to free him. Must also pay the other share of the individual in order to free him. And then the servant becomes free. وإلا فقد عتق منه ما عتق وفي لفظ وإلا قوم عليه فاستعصي به غير مشقوق عليه. If that person who freed him is not able to pay the other individual his share, so the slave could be free totally, then the servant is allowed to work in his spare time in order to pay for himself. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, فإن علق عتقه بموته فهو مدبر. طيب, mudabbar, you will find that in the books, you will find that in fiqh. In the books of the fuqaha, you will find them talking about mudabbar and mukatab and so on. What is and who is a mudabbar? A mudabbar is a person whose master says to him, once I die, you're free. A mudabbar is a person whose master says to him, once I die, you are free. The Shaykh says, يَعْتُقُ بِمَوْتِهِ إِذَا خَرَجَ مِنَ الثُّلُثِ. يَعْتُقُ, he becomes free if this person dies. If the person dies. However, that's if he's within the thuluth. If he's within the thuluth. Where did we study a thuluth? Not thuluth in fara'id, lakin when a person is dying and he's allowed to say, what is the thing that a person dies just before he dies? Wasiyah. Wasiyah, when the person wants to give charity, how much is he allowed to give? A third. Excellent. So if the servant is worth a third, then he is freed. Mathalan, let's say a man leaves behind £6,000 cash, and the servant himself is worth 3,000. He leaves behind how much? £6,000. And the servant is worth £3,000. The servant, in this case, will be free. As soon as that individual dies, he will become free. Why is that? Because 9,000, what is a thuluth of 9,000? 3,000. So he's literally just enough for the thuluth. So he goes off scot-free. He's freed. Like thuluth or less. That's the wasiyah. That is, like here it's if he's within that thuluth, then he's free. However, if he's not a thuluth, all he leaves behind is that one servant, then he doesn't become free immediately. He is sold, and then whatever is remaining goes back to the people that are inheriting him, and he becomes free. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ heard of a man who freed all of his slaves. He freed all of his slaves. So he died, but before he died, he said, I free all of my slaves. He had 6 slaves. He had 6 slaves. The wasiyah, how much is he allowed to give? 2 slaves out of the 6. But he said, I free all of my slaves, and that's the only wealth that he had. The Messenger ﷺ paired the 6 slaves up into 2. How many pairs do we have? 3. 2. And he freed 1 thuluth, 1/3. How many were free? 2 were free. 4 still remain as property, and they go to the people that inherit that individual. Right. Then the Shaykh says, Rahimahullah, وَالْكِتَابَةُ أَنْ يَشْتَرِيَ رَقِيقُ نَفْسَهُ مِنْ سَيِّدِهِ بِثَمَنٍ مُؤَجَّلٍ بِأَجَلَيْنِ فَأَكْثَرٍ قال تعالى فكاتبوهم إن علمتم فيهم خيرا. Then the next thing that the Shaykh is talking about is al-mukatab. Al-mukatab is the slave who says to his master, I want to buy my freedom. I want to buy my freedom. So the Shaykh says بثمن مؤجل, يعني in installments, بأجلين فأكثر, in 2 payments or more. In 2 payments or more. So al-mukatab is the servant saying to his master, oh master, I wish to free myself. And the master says, buy your freedom. So he says, okay, how much is he worth? He's worth, let's say, 10,000. And he says, every month I'm going to give you £2,000. How many months is he going to be free? Within how many months? 5 months. Or he can say, I'm going to pay you 2 months in installments, 5,000 and 5,000. Someone may say, where is he going to get that money from? Someone might lend it to him. And this happened, who's heard of Hadith Barira? The hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ يَشْتَرِدُونَ شُرُوطًا لَيْسَتْ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. That hadith is Mukataba Barira. She belonged to a group of people and she wanted to buy her freedom. And Aisha said she was going to buy her freedom for her. And that's the stories, the hadith has a lot of understanding to it. Lakin, that is a mukatab. What is a mukatab? A slave that buys his freedom. Due to the verse of Allah Jalla wa Ala, فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ إِنْ عَلِمْتُمْ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا. فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ, write a contract with them, allow them to buy themselves out if you know in them that there is khayr. What does it mean by khayr? يعني صلاحا في دينهم, the Shaykh says, صلاحا في دينهم وكسبا فإن خيف منه الفساد بعتقه أو كتابته أو ليس له كسب فلا يشرع عتقه ولا كتابته. طيب. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, إن علمتم فيهم خيرا, if you know goodness in them. What does it mean? Meaning, if this person is a person who's upright and a person who is a person who can provide for themselves, a person that can provide for themselves, and also they're not a person that will cause corruption, chaos, and fasad. And they are a person that can provide for themselves. If they are of that, meaning if they can provide for themselves, then you can free them. Because later on, when you free them, khalas, they'll go out into the marketplace and they'll work. You won't fear poverty for them. Like, also, if you know that this person is a zalim, he's an oppressor, he's violent, and if he's given his freedom, he's going to start beating people up, and he's not a person who can be trusted, then it is safer to keep him within, to keep him as a slave and not to free him. So that is the meaning behind إن علمتم فيهم خيرا. And that is for the best interest of him, and sometimes it can be for the best interest of the people around him. Then the Shaykh says, وَلَا يَعْتُقُ الْمُكَاتَبُ إِلَّا بِالْأَدَاءِ. And the mukatab does not become free unless he pays everything. Unless he pays everything that he's meant to pay. Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-mukatabu abdun ma baqiya alayhi min mukatabatihi dirhamun." The mukatab will remain a slave for as long as there remains a part of him that is a slave. So, mathalan, we say the master says to him, "You've got 5 months to pay your 10,000. He pays 2,000 each month. After the 3rd month, he can't say, 'Listen, I've already given you 6,000, so allow me to go now.' Nor can he say after the 8th month, I've paid you paid you 8 grand, or after the 4th month, I've paid you 8 grand, so free me." No, that's not permissible. At the end, when he pays everything, that is when he becomes free. Now, the next mas'ala is walad. Walad. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه مرفوعا وعن عمر رضي الله عنه موقوفا أيما أمة ولدت من سيدها فهي حرة بعد موته. وراجح الموقوف على عمر والله أعلم. الولد is what? Is the woman whose master has intercourse with her and she gives birth to his child. That is walad. A female servant whose husband has intercourse with and she gives birth to his child. He's not allowed to sell her, and when he dies, she becomes free. When he dies, she becomes free. So in a nutshell, that is the a female can be a master, but that mulkul yamin thing doesn't apply to women. And she can't say, "I'm going to have intercourse with him because he is my mulkul yamin." That only applies with men. The female doesn't inherit. The female servant doesn't inherit anything. She's just free. طيب. So that is باب العتق in a nutshell. تفضل. إذا خرج من الثلث مثلا, the example that I mentioned, if a person مثلا says a person leaves behind مثلا he leaves behind the servant. The servant is worth, let's say, £6,000. The servant is worth £6,000. The person that's died, how much wealth has he left behind? £6,000. The servant can't be free based on that, because that means he has done the wasiyah of all of his wealth. And is that permissible from what we've studied? La, a person can only give wasiyah of how much? A third. So what do? We sell that servant, and the 6,000 that you get from the servant, 2,000 the slave is obviously becomes free, right? And the 4,000 that's left goes back to the inheritance. That is he gets freed. In any case, he gets freed. Lakin sometimes he gets freed just like that, And sometimes he gets freed after being sold. After being sold, يعني the amount of wealth that he has is more than the actual, because he's everything that the person leaves behind. Like the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, the individual that said, I free all of my slaves as a wasiyah. That's all of the wealth that he left behind. 6 slaves. So they are wealth. How much is he allowed to give as a wasiyah? 1/3. 6. 1/3 of 6 is what? Of 6 is what? 2. That's why 2 servants were free and the other 4 remained in as slaves. The Prophet ﷺ drew lots for them. They're worth the same, na'am. They're worth the same, lakin they can't all be freed because that's all of his wealth otherwise. And we're not allowed to give sadaqah, wasiyah to more than a thuluth. So what do? We can't say to them, listen, we're going to choose you and you and you. And we do lots, like the Messenger ﷺ did. Can slaves marry? No, slaves can marry. Huh? Naam. Can a woman have a master and be married? Naam. That actually happened. The hadith of Bagheera that I was telling you about, she was married to another slave called Mughith. She was married to another slave called Mughith. And when she gained her freedom, she was still his wife. Lakin, it's up to her whether she wants to remain with him or become free. So the Messenger ﷺ said to her, and he was interceding for Mughith. He said to Bagheera, he wants you to remain as his wife and so on, but it's up to you. And she said to him, Ya Rasulullah, is it a shara' or is it a shafa'a? Meaning, are you interceding for him and you're vouching on his behalf, or is it shara' that I must do? Because if it is that she must do legislation, then she obeys the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Lakin if it is just by way of choice, she didn't want him. And she didn't want him. Say that again. The what? La. If she's married, the master can't go to her. If she's married, it's haram for the master to go to her. Right. That's if the inheritors agree, if the heirs agree, the people that are due to inherit him, if they agree and say, listen, he's the only wealth and he's worth 10 grand, but we're only allowed to, 3,000 plus is how much he's allowed to free or use as wasiyah, khalas, they say we leave him lillah, that's permissible. Hassan. La, the mas'ala of itq is not applied today. It's not applied today. There's nowhere that there's itq. Like, why do we study it? It's in the books of the fuqaha. So when you study the books of the fuqaha, you're going to come across it. And even if it's there, even if it's not applied or not, you still study it. Mathalan jihad, you learn the ahkam, where you might not find jihad at that particular moment. Lakin, you learn the ahkam. And ilm is ibadah itself. Ilm is ibadah itself. And if it was to be said that Imam Sa'di rahimahullah took this chapter out, it would have been good. Maybe put something else in there. For example, adhan and iqama. Adhan and iqama. Have we come through it from Manhaj as-Salikin? No, because it's not in it. طيب. الله يبارك فيك. وقل رب زدني